the showers before they catch your washing. How's that for you? Now, I've got time left over to talk about El Nino, La Nina. Oh, yep, cool. So, we're living on planet Earth, and the weather is wind and rain and temperature. We'll have a look at the clouds. Clouds are caused by water vapor in the air being cooled back, condensing back into cloud. The water vapor comes from a surface of water through evaporation. The evaporation process requires sunlight. The warmer that water, the faster the evaporation. And so on planet Earth, most of the clouds are actually generated over the equator. If I could show you a satellite picture imagery of the clouds over planet Earth for the last 2 weeks, you'd see them. They're mainly bubbling up. The water vapor is coming up over the equator, and then it's being spun around the rest of the world by the upper winds. It's been worked out that 80% of the rain that falls in Auckland actually comes from water vapor that originally evaporated in the tropics and in the equator. But most of the time it's coming at us from Indonesia across Australia. Sometimes it's coming from Tonga. 20% is picked up over Tasman Sea and then dropped back on us. The showers that we get in Auckland are pretty good examples of that kind of a short-term water vapor up-down. But most of it goes straight up to the top of the atmosphere. It's carried around by these kind of fuel lines of wind aloft, which drive the water vapor around the planet. So it stands to reason, if you want to have a look at the weather engine of the whole planet, you're going to have to look at its controls. And one of its original controls and settings, like a thermostat setting, is the temperature of the sea near the equator. Right? Understand that? The sea surface temperature along the widest ocean, which is the Pacific Ocean. And right in the middle of that, from about the date line across to South America, around the Galapagos, that area there is the target area for an El Nino or a La Nina. It turns out to be that that's the most important part of the water vapor turning into evaporation for the whole planet. Now, when it's cooler than normal, we have what we call a La Nina. Cooler than normal seawater along the Pacific encourages all the weather systems to go south. And so over New Zealand, we tend to have a lot more northeasterly airflow coming in at us, say, from about Tonga, that area, especially during summer. So La Nina brings us northeasterlies and a wet summer, just like last summer. Beautiful. Easy to understand. The other one is when the sea surface temperatures around the Pacific, around the tropical Pacific, equatorial Pacific, are slightly warmer than normal, creating more evaporation and adding a little bit more energy to the heat engine, to the weather engine of the planet. That's called El Nino. Originally it's called El Nino because the people who were studying this kind of episode, which impacts on the weather of the planet, they thought, well, it's interesting. It seems to happen about once every 2 or 3 years and lasts about 18 months. And whenever it happens, all that warm water accumulates and then flows on to Peru. And the people in Peru, they notice it coming onto their shores. And so they had a name for it because they observed that it tended to arrive there on the Peruvian shores at about the same time every time a new episode started. And it was generally around about mid-December or late December. And that was about the time of the year when they were having a festival. They always love to name these things that occur naturally according to the festivals that they arrived on. So the festival they were having in late December in Peru was El Nino de Navidad, the Christ child, Christmas time. That's why they named it El Nino in big capital letters. So that's how it's got that name. But That was in the early 80s. They started giving these things the name El Nino, and they started studying them. Late 80s, we had the reverse of these El Ninos, a non-El Nino. And they said, what shall we call this? It was starting to produce floods over Australia. Oh dear. So it's the opposite of an El Nino. And there was a headline in the United States, I wish I could find it nowadays. I did see it once, but it's gone now. I can't trace it. It said, Antichrist hits Australia. Because El Nino is Christ, so the opposite of it would have to be the Antichrist. But no, they didn't use Antichrist for the La Nina. They thought about it for a week or so. Said, oh no, a boy child is an El Nino, so a girl child is a La Nina. We'll call it La Nina in capital letters. Okay? They could have gone back to Peru and asked the people there, what do you call it when you're not having an El Nino? And they do have a name for it in Peru. It's an El Vejo. I don't know how good my Spanish is or how good your understanding of Spanish is, but an El Vejo is an old man. So you either have a boy child El Nino or an El Vejo old man. But no one's using El Vejo. They're now all calling it La Nina. And that's what we had last summer.